Hi guys, it's Kirsty. Today's video is more for friends and family and partners of OCD sufferers more than OCD sufferers, because I just wanted to offer some advice to people who have a loved one who is currently suffering from OCD or anxiety. Before I go into that, I would like to ask, please do subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below, just so that you can stay up to date with the new videos as they're released. So firstly, I want to say that if you are a loved one of somebody suffering from OCD watching this video, I think that you're awesome for kind of trying to educate yourself so that you can be better equipped to help your loved one. And I also want to acknowledge how hard it must be for you to be having to watch someone that you care so much about suffering from OCD, which, you know, it's incredibly confusing for the person suffering from it. I can't imagine what it must be like to see someone, you know, suffering with it that you love, and try to understand it, because it is so very confusing and it is so illogical as well. And if you're somebody who is able to kind of see that, and somebody who, you know, strongly knows that thoughts are just thoughts and all of that, you know, the things that, you know, a non-OCD sufferer can easily grasp and believe truly, it must be really difficult to see somebody still suffering, no matter how many times you may have unknowingly, you know, well-meaningly reassured them before knowing that it was OCD. No matter how many times you might have told them it doesn't mean anything and thoughts are thoughts and all of that stuff, the fact that that person still continues to doubt and continues to have to go through varying rituals, it just must be incredibly confusing for you. So firstly, please do know that, you know, it's nothing personal to you, that any reassurance that you may have given in the past before you knew more about OCD, it's nothing personal to you that your loved one isn't able to feel better from your reassurance. Unfortunately, as you might be learning at the moment, that the more somebody with OCD receives reassurance, the more they need reassurance, because it fuels the fear cycle. Every time somebody who is suffering from OCD asks for reassurance or confesses or does any other kind of physical compulsions or mental rituals or anything like that, or avoids, that person is reinforcing the belief that whatever they are kind of latched onto or obsessing about is real and is awful and unbearable, and they absolutely can't stand it. And the more they're doing that, the more they're saying it's real, and the more they're saying it's real to their brains with these behaviors, the more real it ends up feeling. So any kind of reassurance that your partner or friend or family member, child might have asked for previously, and that you've given them reassurance not knowing, you know, what you were necessarily feeding into, it will have been fueling kind of the cycle. But you should try not to, don't beat yourself up if previously you have reassured, because how on earth would you know? OCD is so misunderstood still, and it's seen as maybe just hand washing or light switches or whatever. So if somebody that you love has had a theme, you know, along the what they call pure O, I don't know, they've been latched on to the idea that they're doubting their sexuality, or they've got POCD, or health obsessions, or ROCD, or any of those. How on earth would you necessarily know that what they were suffering from at the time of them asking for reassurance or confessing or whatever, how on earth would you have known that it was OCD when we're not necessarily, you know, there's not that much education available, you know, to learn about that's what somebody from OCD may that somebody suffering from OCD may be experiencing. You know, when we see OCD incorrectly portrayed in the media, well, of course it's going to give us the wrong impression. Certainly for me, before I started to Google the symptoms that I was experiencing when mine got really bad, I still thought, even though I knew I was an anxiety sufferer, I didn't know anything about OCD and what it actually is. So I suppose my first piece of advice is to show yourself a good degree of compassion. Firstly, to acknowledge that, you know, although it's hard for you, you know, your loved one is suffering, you're suffering too. So give yourself a good amount of compassion, and also if you maybe have been involved in any rituals previously unknowingly or reassured or anything, please also show yourself compassion for that, because you know you wouldn't know. And also without fully knowing all about OCD and everything, why wouldn't somebody try to help their loved one who's in distress? Why wouldn't you reassure? It's just like, you know, the way an OCD sufferer, you know, wants to know, you know, they want to know that their theme isn't real. You know, that's fair enough. It's completely fair enough. Why would they want to chance it? Unfortunately, that's not how it works, but why would they want to? And I think the same applies for loved ones. You know, when you're watching someone you care about deeply suffering, you want to take that suffering away. So you know, what's in the past, and you know, any kind of reassurance that accidentally previously or whatever, I think it's really helpful to put, you know, don't be beating yourself up about that. So the next thing I would suggest is oh, and I also want to add, your loved one would have found reassurance elsewhere anyway. So, you know, they would have asked somebody else. If you hadn't given it to them, and I'm going to reassure you now, if you hadn't given them reassurance, they would have found it anywhere elsewhere. They would have asked somebody else. They would have Googled. They would have spent ages ruminating. There's you know, other compulsions. So secondly is something that you're probably already doing if you're watching this video, and it's educating yourself. So same as with somebody who is suffering from OCD, if they know what they're dealing with, then they can helps them to, you know, not fall into the various traps, and know that, you know, the behaviours that are not helpful to them, and they know to reduce them. And it's the same for friends and family and partners of people who are suffering from OCD. If you're educated about it, you know, and what makes it worse, what makes it better, you know, the treatment that your friend, family, partner, whatever might be going through, it's helpful for you to just have an understanding of it. You don't need to be an expert, but just a basic understanding of, you know, the compulsion. The more compulsions you do, the more obsessions you get, basically. The more you avoid, the more stuck you become, basically. The more an OCD sufferer kind of space that they give to their OCD, the more space the OCD will want to continue taking, basically. So also with this educating yourself with the treatment that people will go through for OCD, the gold standard treatment is exposure with response prevention, which is actually, you know, from the outside it might seem like a pretty gruesome treatment, you know, because this person's having to expose themselves to the things that they're frightened of. And as a loved one of that person, it might seem a bit like, oh, I don't, you know, God, why would I want to encourage them to distress themselves further when I've seen them suffering so much? But please know that, you know, there's a reason why exposure is so widely used for OCD and actually other mental health conditions as well. You know, that people suffering from perhaps PTSD or various other things might do exposures, and people who have you know, extreme phobias as well. So it could be useful for you to understand why they might be doing exposures, so that you know how worthwhile the exposures might be for them, even though it looks distressing. You know, it might appear distressing. you have to show OCD who's boss, and the way to do that is to go head first into what OCD is trying to scare you with, and that is what that person needs to do. And it's not easy for them, obviously, and it's not going to be easy for you to see it, but don't discourage it. It might be tempting to, you know, say to them, oh, you don't have to put yourself through this, but please trust me, as somebody who, you know, has done difficult exposures and spent, you know, a lot of time working on my recovery from OCD. When you get close to the other side, it is so worth it for that person. Their quality of life will be so dramatically improved. So I suppose the obvious one would be also don't take part in any, you know, compulsions. So don't, if you suspect, you know, suspect any reassurance seeking questions, repetitive questions, or can I just check, or would you mind just checking this for me, anything like that, your loved one will unknowingly try to wrap it up like it's not reassurance. And they will not even realize that they're asking for reassurance sometimes. But if you can kind of try and spot it and say, I think it's best I don't answer that, even if it's not a reassurance question, if your response to them is with their best intentions in mind, i.e. I think it's best I don't answer that, then what's the worst that can happen? Okay, they don't get an answer to their question, whether it's OCD or not, but I think it's best for you to, if it you know, walks like reassurance, smells like reassurance, it's reassurance, basically. And another thing would be, you know, don't, if your loved one has been potentially avoiding doing things, avoiding going outside, I would say don't facilitate this too much. Again, you've done, you know, you'll be doing all you can, trying to help them out, you know, taking the load off them, and you know, you might be picking up the slack with housework or anything like that. And that's really great, you know, because sometimes somebody who is suffering from OCD needs some time to do their treatment and work on, you know, whether it's the cognitive side of their recovery work or if it's the exposures, that does take time. But also it's very useful for people suffering with OCD to have busyness in their life and structure, and that could involve walking the dog, for example. So you don't always have to offer to walk the dog for somebody who has OCD and a dog, because, you know, maybe you do it together, but it's good for that person to get outside, to not be stuck inside with their thoughts, you know, to be out and about, getting fresh air on their face, and also taking responsibility for things as well. So that's something. It's kind of trying to get the balance right, I suppose, between you helping them out where you can, but don't facilitate them, you know, shutting themselves away inside, hiding under their pillows. And the same applies for, you know, OCD can be really, it can make you feel incredibly down. It can make you feel as if you might be depressed or something. And it will make you feel like you just don't want to get out of bed, because some of the thoughts and the way it makes you feel is so incredibly distressing. And again, I recommend not facilitating this kind of thing, because it's not helping that person, because they're just avoiding life. And even if it's baby steps one day, even if it's just getting out of bed and cleaning their teeth, that is progress. So to encourage that, it is very helpful. And so one thing also I think would be useful is that, you know, as your loved one starts to progress in their recovery and they appear to be doing a lot better, and they say they're feeling a lot better, and they you know, they will be taking strides. If they're kind of disputing, you know, working on the cognitive side, you know, whether that's, you know, disputing their irrational beliefs, or whether it's doing exposures or any of the kind of agreed treatments that they're doing, you know, that they've agreed with their therapist or OCD coach or course or anything, you know, they'll be making progress and feeling a lot better and seeming a lot better probably as well. But please do not underestimate what is still going on in their minds. It is exhausting. Even when you're, you know, several months into your recovery and you've noticed, you know, real big improvements, there's probably still quite a lot of mental work going on. So even when the OCD sufferer has, you know, reduced their compulsions, you know, their obvious compulsions that they might be doing, whether that's, you know, hiding things, hand washing, any checking of any kind, whatever that might be, even if they're, you know, started using knives again to cut vegetables, whatever it might be, or they're not asking for reassurance anymore, they're not Googling anymore, they're not confessing anymore, the harder rituals sometimes to stop are the mental rituals, and they might still be going on in the background, and you wouldn't necessarily know about it. So that person is still expending a lot of mental energy, even though you might not even realize. So it's, you know, it'll be great seeing that person smiling more again, feeling a bit lighter, not avoiding, wanting to do more, but and looking better. Maybe they've, you know, got the colour back in their face a little bit more. Please don't underestimate that person, even though they're feeling a lot better and they say they're feeling a lot better. If they say that they are, you know, they're having, you know, feeling a bit still not great, even if they look like they are doing great, don't underestimate how it might still be feeling, basically, because even after you've started to unlock more and more, when you're in recovery and you're going about your day-to-day life, you are doing it with OCD going on in the background. And so, for example, it might still be difficult for that person to concentrate at all times. They still might not be able to concentrate the way you can. They might find it hard to make decisions, just to answer simple questions. They might still look distracted sometimes, and you might have had times when you felt relief that, you know, you're getting more of your person back in a way. You're getting your person back from OCD. And that's and then it can be frustrating if, like, hang on, why you don't seem present. Please bear with that person. It does take a while, and as I say, even after you know, the obvious compulsions have stopped and that person is seeming much more like themselves, there still can be a lot of you know, mental work in the background, and they will still have days when they've got kind of unexplainable anxiety feelings, and everyone's recovery is different, so that might not be the case, but the likelihood is it might be. And so also, while that person is at that point, you might think, well, why are they still having to do these difficult exposures, and why are they still you know, spending time doing the cognitive work when they're, you know, clearly better? You know, why aren't they wanting to spend more time with me yet, doing various other things? Now that person still needs to be, even though that person is doing a lot better, there's still is suffering going on, and there's still work to do in their recovery, even if, like I say, even if it's not obvious that how much they might be suffering at this point. So please don't discourage that person. You know, say, you don't need to do that tonight, you're doing good, just chill and watch telly or something. It might be incredibly well-meaning, but that person still is, if they're still doing their cognitive work and, you know, working on their beliefs and still doing exposures, then that's great, because you don't want to get to a certain point in recovery and stop doing them things thinking that you don't need to, because you might find that you relapse, or also, you know, coasting as well. You don't have to, even though the way an OCD sufferer might be they feeling maybe so much better than it was at the worst point, there is still potential for them to feel even better. So if that person still feels that they want to keep working on it, then I recommend really, you know, encouraging that still. Don't be tempted to say, oh, treat yourself to a day off or something, because they're doing that work because there's still some suffering going on, even if it's not super obvious. So that's something I kind of wanted to add there, because I feel like that might not be an obvious one. And you might be sort of watching this thinking, oh, I would never, you know, I want them to get better, but it can look like they're a lot better than they actually are sometimes. I think sometimes you get used to kind of functioning maybe with it after a while, especially and sometimes in my experience I was just so grateful to be feeling a bit better, that I kind of didn't want to let people down by necessarily saying, but I'm still feeling crap actually. You know, I'm feeling a lot better, but I'm still feeling a bit crap. And, you know, to see the disappointment on people's faces, you don't always want to say it. So, you know, don't underestimate what's going on kind of in the background mentally for these guys still. And then something that I do, I think is worth a kind of mention is that somebody who is kind of doing a lot of mental work and sort of feeling quite mentally tired can sometimes be a bit, you know, an OCD sufferer can be a bit irritable from time to time, potentially, especially if you're not giving them reassurance. Please don't take this personally, but this does lead to my next point, is that it's somebody said to me when, so my mum was ill, physically ill, when I was in my 20s. She passed away. But during her illness, several people said this to me, and I think it's very important that you need to, the best way to help her is to make sure that you're looking after yourself completely. And then you can also look after her better, or if it needs be. And that's something I would say to somebody supporting somebody who is struggling with any kind of mental difficulty, is that you need to be looking after yourself. It's no good you sort of putting your heart and soul into, you know, supporting your loved one through their recovery journey, but at the expense of your physical and mental health, because, you know, your happiness is important as well. And if sometimes that you need to have some alone time, then I think you definitely need to be doing that and looking after yourself too. And with that comes, you know, the tough love aspect of it as well. You know, it's kind of saying, you know, you are allowed to say what you need as well. If you need some you time, then that's important for you, because your relationship with that person, whether that's a parent-child, I appreciate that's a bit more complicated, but if it's a parent-adult-child, a partnership, romantic partnership, or if it's a friendship, or siblings or something, your well-being is really important too. And I think it's good for you to remember that and to do nice things for yourself as well. And also you might want to comfort your loved one and show that you're there for them regardless, without being reassuring-y, without offering reassurance. So you can still, you know, you can put your arm around them and say, like, you know, you got this, you can do it, you know, various things. You can give them sort of, you know, give them a hug or whatever without saying reassurance to them. So you can still kind of show that you're there for them, you're supporting them, but you can't tell them that what they're worried about isn't real, that, you know. So I think that's sort of important for you to find what works for you in terms of, you know, you could agree it with your loved one, you know, how, you know, I want, obviously for your own good, I need to not reassure you, but I want you to know that I love you and, you know, I've got you, you know, I've got your back here, but I'm not going to mess with your recovery by reassuring you, basically. So like I say, you can still give them a hug, you can still, you know, say things like, you know, I'm here for you, and, you know, I love you, whatever. This can be done without, you know, addressing the topic that they might be worrying about. So I hope this video has been helpful to you if you are a loved one of somebody suffering from OCD. I hope it's been helpful in terms of kind of explaining some things about what might be going on with them. I do, as I say, I do recommend sort of, you know, reading up a little bit about it as well, and reading up a little bit more about the kind of treatments that your loved one might be undertaking for their anxiety or OCD. And yes, I hope it has been helpful. And I think, again, I will reiterate the fact that I think you're completely amazing for watching this video or any video that offers guidance for loved ones who of OCD sufferers, or anyone who's suffering from mental health difficulties. It's not easy supporting people with these kind of, you know, who are going through this. It takes its toll, and I just think, you know, it takes a lot of strength and compassion. So the fact that you're watching this video or any other video is great. So thank you on behalf of, you know, those of us who have suffered from or are suffering from OCD. But do take care, and see you soon. Bye.